Been having Jose going over that, and thank you for doing that. I just wanted to bring forward some pictures. I know it's easy for us to say, what do we have substandard housing? Do we need this type of program in Rancho Cordova? And these, I can guarantee you, are all pictures that have been taken here in the time that I've been working here in the last year. So I have about 7 slides I'd just like to share with council and the members of the public. So we've got the first house where we've got a boarded up windows. That one is actually occupied, and those people cannot get out in case of fire. The top right-hand one, obviously, we've got no fire extinguishers. And the third one was where an air conditioning unit was removed, but the hole was never filled up. And these are all occupied dwellings. This is water damage. We seem to have a lot of problems with water damage when people don't fix their ceilings, or when an upstairs tenant leaves the water running, and we've got mold and mildew, deteriorated ceilings, and all those things you're seeing on the floor are fungi. And I think that's only the second time in my career I've actually seen them growing on a carpet like that. That's pretty wet. Let me back up. Yes, this thing was actually, I shouldn't say this, I named it, but it was about this big. But I mean, to think that people live in those conditions, it's not fair. It's not fair. You got cockroaches. The one on the top right, I was in shock when I saw this, and actually this was one of Philip's cases. Those are termites, and the tenant never called us until it got to that point where the termites are so infested that you can see them like that in the corner of the structure. And then obviously the bottom one is rodents. These are all non-maintained buildings, deteriorated stucco with the pipe coming out. Not only is it bad for the structure of the building, but that allows rodents and cockroaches and other things to enter the building. It needs to be secured from allowing infestations. The top right one, we've got a damaged accessory structure that needs to be repaired. And then I think we were actually being nice calling this a damaged HVAC system. There's not much of it left, but that was the heat and air system for that unit, and that was an occupied unit. We've got a drywall and ventilation system that's deteriorating. Top right is the hazardous wiring, and these are things that we do see on a regular basis. These aren't just pictures that I took one day and said I'm going to hold these up to show to council. These are things that we're seeing on a regular basis. Dilapidated exterior siding, so there's no water protection. You're going to get the water intrusion into that property and end up with a mold and mildew. These are some structural hazards. Top left-hand one, a very deteriorated stairway that we're going to have them have a structural engineer look at, and you can see that the walkway is crumbling on the right. That's the same complex. And then at the bottom, that's where they've just sort of shored up a single-family resident that was being rented out and put tarps up to waylay the water. This is, again, we see this quite regularly: damaged wall next to the tub, broken windows or ill-fitting window panes. And then the bottom right-hand one, that's just a very small area, but the entire interior of the complex was flooded with raw sewage. And it was a serious plumbing issue. So I didn't want to do too many pictures, but I wanted to give you some of the ideas of the things that we're seeing out there and things that we really truly believe that we can abate with an ordinance such as this, being much more proactively. We would have the program run by Phil Nichols, who's been doing this and is very well versed in the building codes. We work very closely with the building department. Richard Hodneck comes out with us on a regular basis when we have severe building issues. And also, I'd just like to take a second, if I might, and ask Officer Shelley Hodneck to come down and tell us how this is actually assisting us. We all talk about the broken window theory, but the reality is, if it doesn't look like somebody cares, the crime rises. And we've had a couple of really big successes with our POP officers, so I'll let Shelley have a few words.
Thank you, Carrie. Good evening, Council. My name is Shelley Hodgkins, and I'm one of the POP officers for Rancho Cordova, and POP is problem-oriented policing. So We don't work a normal patrol assignment, but we are assigned specific areas, and our duties are to pretty much abate any existing problems in there, deal with citizen complaints, things like that. I've been with the city since the city incorporated, so I worked patrol out here for a couple years, and I've been in POP about 6 months. Prior to that, I actually trained out here in 2000. So the apartment complex that Carrie is talking about is something I was familiar with just when I trained out here several years ago. It was a huge problem then. It generated a lot of calls for service. There's a lot of criminal activity that kind of centered around the area just because the dilapidated buildings, substandard housing tends to attract, not to be unkind, but kind of a lower level of tenants. When I came back out here working for the city, the apartment complex in question was essentially the same. And as a patrol officer, I can tell you that it's not for lack of law enforcement intention. We spent a lot of time there, a lot of what we call on-view activities, which is just where we go, contact suspicious subjects, things like that. So as an agency, we took positive steps to try to alleviate some of the problem, but honestly, the improvement that we've seen now did not truly start until code enforcement got involved. Once the code enforcement team, I mean, essentially it was a whole team of people, code enforcement, the attorneys, working with the owner and the bank. A lot of people were involved, but the actual improvement and the calls for service going down, the level of tenants starting to come up came with code enforcement. And I've been out there with them and watched them do an inspection. The things that they address improve the quality of life for the people who have to live there. And a lot of these places, for whatever reason, people have credit problems, things like that. So they're actually forced to live in these conditions because they cannot qualify. Even if they had the money, they cannot qualify for better housing. So when code enforcement comes in and actually starts improving the living area, we see a drastic improvement in the people that live there. A lot of people get evicted, and then as the new tenants come in, the building outside looks good. Inside, they have heat, they have water, they have a landlord who's suddenly responsive to their needs, and the clientele starts to improve. And this particular complex, it used to generate probably 2 to 3 calls for service a day, virtually maybe 1 or 2 calls a week now. So it really is a great tool for us, and it's something that as POP officers, we use code a ton. I'm constantly calling them out there for different complexes to try to address some of these issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. That was very useful. Anything further from staff on this item? Good. Well, I think this is just an enormously important night and an enormously important issue for the city. There's probably no more important component of our Strong Neighborhoods initiative than this one, at least in my mind. I want to thank staff for all of your hard work on this item, particularly in cooperation with a lot of people in the community, either law enforcement or with the Apartment Owners Association, to bring this one forward. I know it was a lot of work, but I think it'll be worth it. I've got a couple of questions, and I think they're keys to success for this particular program. One is we've got to have a way to sort the good guys from the bad guys, because there are rental property owners out there who do everything right. They keep their property up, they screen their tenants, they have qualified managers, and then there are apartment owners who don't do any of that. They allow their property to decline, they're not really interested in any sort of capital improvement, they don't screen their tenants, and they don't have adequate management staff in place. How does this ordinance separate those two so you're not penalizing the good guys? Because the last thing I want to do as a city is penalize the people who are doing things right. What I want to do is come down extraordinarily heavy on those who aren't. So tell us, how does this ordinance accomplish those two interests?
Those are actually keys of this ordinance. The inspectors go out there, and they actually are trained to do this, to go out there and see what happens on its own, wear and tear, simple things, and what actually is a problem. For any violators out there, there are penalties involved. And later on, we didn't amend that part of the chapter, but there are heavy penalties involved. There are fines. They will also be responsible for paying staff time, whether it be reinspection, how many times they have to go out there. So they will be paying the price for violating the code. Also, with severe situations, we will be having these property owners and property maintenance agencies attend this training program as well. So the focus is on going after the violators, and people who are doing everything right should not be carrying the weight of this program.
How do we decide who we're going to inspect and when we're going to inspect? How does somebody qualify for that extra attention?
Well, thus far, Bear Sander, we've just really been doing it on the case where we get a complaint and we get out there and we look at one unit and we move through, but we are actually going to work through systematically going through all of them. We're doing a list of all our complexes, and we've been doing them on Blight Busters, and we had one in Lincoln Village, and we walked in and looked at one unit and walked out, and I knew that I didn't have to look at any more of it. I mean, it's very easy to see after one or two. One unit probably isn't enough, but a couple of 3 units, you can tell whether you really need to give any attention to those. And what we try to do is really commend the property owners on doing a good job, and let them know that we're proud to have them in Rancho Cordova.
And Mr. Mayor, I want to make sure that this is health and safety issues. We're not looking at paint and